So today's name is Al-Latif. Al-Latif, and in English it is translated as the one who is subtle. So I want to ask you guys, if you have interacted with this name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where does it show up? Is there a particular ayah you can think of where Al-Latif shows up in the Quran? What's that? A car accident? Okay. So when a car accident happens, can you explain more?
It's not too big. Allah
So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Latif, and there could be something bigger that He protected you from? Okay. So there's a subtle benefit. So that's how you connect it with the word subtle? Okay. Where else does this name show up? I'll give you a hint. It's about, there's a conversation happening. Alhamdulillah, my son is here today. And whenever I see our children, we try to teach them about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's a conversation in the Quran between a father and a son. And the father, when he's telling the son about Islam, he goes on to start by explaining to him who Allah is, by explaining to him about the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then he talks about this particular name. So who is that father and son pair in the Quran? Luqman alayhi salam. Yes. So the ayah in Surah Luqman, it says, Abada a'udhu billahi min shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahim, Surah Luqman, Surah 31, verse number 16. Ya bunayya. So this is one of the benefits, is the way he talks to his son is very respectfully. So when we do want to advise our kids or want to talk to them about Islam, number one is, how do you start the conversation? A lot of times it might be because they're not praying or something that's bothering us about their attitude. So we start off by coming down at them, right? But the way Luqman alayhi salam starts is by giving them very, Ya bunayya is full of love, affection, care, and you can also add love to it, where he's saying, oh my son, I love you, and I want to share something beneficial. And then he goes on to say, Innaha in taku mithqala habba. So subhanAllah, instead of telling him, pray or worship Allah, he tells him who Allah is. And you'll see it's such a powerful statement, because what he's trying to do is make the son realize that even when I'm gone, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is still watching, and He's always aware. So even if I'm not watching and you're not, you think you got away because you could tell me that you already prayed and you haven't actually prayed, but remember who Allah is. So he says, إن تك مثقال حبة من خردل فتكن في صخرة أو في السماوات أو في الأرض. So he talks about the heavens and the earth. يأتي بها الله إن الله, and now the name of Allah comes up, Al-Latif and Al-Khabir. So Khabir, we'll talk about it in another gathering. So in English, oh my dear son, I love you, I care for you. Indeed, if wrong should be happening as the weight of a mustard seed, and you could hide it within a rock or anywhere, and that rock could be anywhere in the heavens or the earth, then Allah will bring it forth. And Allah is the most Latif and the most Khabir. He's the one who is completely aware of everything that's happening. This should give us a lot of comfort, first of all, right? A lot of people, they suffer internally because when they see what's happening around the world, they wonder, where's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this picture? And what Allah is telling us is, it is so subtle that you think that crimes that they're committing that is so obvious are hidden from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Allah can bring a rock that could be in the middle of the darkness in the heavens or the earth, and Allah will bring it forth. And not just that, Al-Latif also means someone who's so subtle that He understands the thoughts that are happening in your mind, the conversations that you have with your own self. Allah is aware of all of that. So it's not just physical things, but Allah is even aware of your intentions. So with that in mind, let's unravel the name of Allah, Al-Latif, and you'll see how much is packed within this conversation. Actually, something that bothered me, there's a very popular Christian pastor, and there was a video that showed up, and he was basically trying to explain how Christianity is the truth, which obviously I don't blame the guy, right? Because everyone wants to prove that their faith is the right faith. So he goes on to talk about Judaism, then he talks about how in Judaism it's limited, Judah, he limited it to an experience, but he doesn't really talk about Allah in a specific way. Then he goes on and talks about Hinduism, and then he talks about Islam, and the video cuts off at the end, because he's not fully satisfied with his own answer. But one of the things he says is, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for us, I respect him. He was an orphan. He did a lot for people, and his message is very beautiful. But he seems to not have access to God, to get to know God, which in our faith we have such an amazing experience, because we get to experience God through the personification of Jesus as God. right? So he was trying to claim that's why we know God so much. And I'm like, man, if you just open up the Quran and you get to see the names of Allah, that Allah is unraveled, you say God is love, but is there an actual name for love in the Bible for Allah? No. You say He's merciful, you say He's just. But as a full package, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have a name for Allah, Al-Wadud, the most loving, the most merciful, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the most forgiving, Al-Ghaffar, Al-Ghafir, Al-Ghafur. We can go on and on, right? The most just, Al-Adl. But then we can go even in more depth and talk about Al-Hakim, the most wise, right? Because if you don't put the Al-Hakim in the picture, then it seems like, why is everything happening? Allah is supposed to be merciful, He's supposed to be loving, and He's supposed to be just. So why is there evil around the world? Well, you forgot about Al-Hakim. You forgot about Al-Latif, right? So I'm like, if you just open up the Quran and realize how much we actually know about our God through these names and attributes. So Al-Latif, and I'll just end it with just without going in depth. Number one, Al-Latif. So in Arabic, you have the word Lata'if, which means gifts. So Al-Latif is someone who gives you gifts, things that you don't even ask for, right? A lot of times we complain about our blessings, but we forget about things that we've already been given. So your eyes, your ability to hear, your ability to, even the heartbeats. We talked about the heartbeat one time. I actually went ahead and did a calculation. I'm like, I really want to know why the heart is such an amazing organ that a lot of us just take it for granted. And it came down to, if you lived a life of about 50 years average, your heart would beat over 2.5 billion times. That's how many times it's going to beat on a lifespan of a person who lives 50 years. So that's just one organ, right? The eyes, the ears, the list goes on. These are gifts that Allah gave us without even us asking for it, right? So we are like walking and talking millionaires, because nobody's going to give up their eye, even if you give them $1 million. If somebody gives me $1 million, I'm like, no, thank you. I'll keep my eye, right? So you're actually a millionaire if you think about it, right? But it's just how we look at our blessings. So those are lata'if Allah gives us. But more specifically, in the Quran, when Allah talks about lata'if, He connects it with children. Children are the best gifts that Allah has given us, and they're a blessing, and they are what carries our name forward, whether it's good or bad way, right? So if we raise them properly, they become, our legacy continues through them, because they will make dua, and then they will teach the next generation, and it's a generational effect. So the way we raise our kids makes a big difference. The second meaning of latif is forbearing. So someone who can punish you, but he forbears. He holds his punishment back. He can easily punish us at any moment, but he holds and withholds and shows his mercy by not taking, so he's not someone who is weak, right? Like there are some people that can't punish or can't do anything because they're just weak. They cannot inflict pain upon you or take revenge because they have no other choice but to just sit back and go through the pain, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the ability to punish, and He very rightfully can punish, but He withholds His punishment. Number three is someone who facilitates His creation by bringing other creation to help them. And that's where the brother's answer is relevant, right? So he said that maybe an accident happens, but you don't know, maybe that accident could have caused some injury in your neck, leg, or something, but you don't know if that accident didn't happen, you could have died in another bigger accident, right? Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings people in our life that protect and take care of us. Like the most obvious one is parents for their children. Like how many children die in their sleep, right? Because they choked over their pillow or some kind of toy or something, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts, especially the mother, in the life of a child, that he's always protected. That's Al-Latif, someone who's bringing other creation to protect you. In case of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for example, he didn't have his parents. Mother passes away very soon after he's born, and father, he never get to see his father. Then his grandfather takes care of him. He passes away, and then his uncle is protecting him, because this is a tribal society. So if he didn't have the protection of his uncle, history could have been different. But then his uncle passes away, his wife passes away, and so he's always losing people. But then Allah brings someone else to help, right? Even non-Muslims sometimes. Like when the embargo happened, when the Muslims were boycotted for 3 years, some of the non-Muslims who saw that this is wrong, spoke against that, and that embargo was lifted. So you don't know how Allah brings His help from other creation. This is all Al-Latif. This is, but if you look at the word Latif and it's just translated as someone who's subtle, it doesn't give you much, right? Number four is He is hidden Himself. So Allah is not meant to be visualized by his creation. Because if you think about it, just the fact that Christians say that God came in the form of a human being, they've already limited God to his creation, right? That's not God. God is above his creation. So for him to walk around the earth as a human being, that right there is not just logically wrong, but it's actually disrespectful, I would say, right? How we lower God to a level that we bring him to his level of creation. So if we were actually able to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that would mean we have the ability to be at the level of God, right? Because we can't visualize, we can't fathom the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Musa alayhi salam asked Allah to see him, and what happened? We know the story, right? So to actually want to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually trying to limit him to his level of creation. And that's not how things work, because Allah says, لا تدرك الأبصار وهو يدرك الأبصار وهو اللطيف الخبير. So again here Allah reminds us of Latif, and he says, our vision cannot perceive him, but he perceives everything. And he is the most subtle, and he's the one who's all aware. Number 5, nothing is hidden from him. So now we know who Allah is, but then how do we connect to Allah al-Latif? We remind ourselves that nothing is hidden, not just the oppression out there, but also the things that I do on a daily basis. Allah is completely aware of it, and that's where we learn about the ayah of Surah Luqman. Number 6, he creates creation that is very subtle and sophisticated. His brother, we lost brother Jaleel. Is he still here? I don't know if he's in there. I would love for you guys to talk to him about scuba diving, because there you go. He heard his name. So we love to hear if the stuff that you've seen under the ocean, right? So I'm not even talking about things that we see on the land, but there is a fish, for example, under the ocean. It's called the puffer fish. You can YouTube it. It actually creates mathematical patterns on the sand, and we would never get to see this creation, but it's there, right? There's creation that we can't even imagine, which actually exists on Earth, which many of us would not even be able to see unless we put the effort to do so. And there's so much, but I'm not even talking about the bigger things like sun, the moon, everything that we see on a bigger scale, and people still deny Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he has so much creation that is so subtle and sophisticated, then it behooves us to not worship him. And finally, this is the big one about Latif, and we would have to have a whole session about this, is the one who understands the hidden benefit in things that are happening to us, but we don't see it. So yesterday in the Angel Circle, we talked about the Khidr and Musa alayhi salam story. When Khidr kills the boy, that's a death that just happened. Musa alayhi salam could not accept that, right? Because Musa alayhi salam does not accept injustice. So he sees the boy being killed, but Khidr later on goes to explain that boy would have become a fitna for his parents, and the parents could eventually leave Islam altogether, right? Or not worship Allah because of those children. And in another ayah in Surah Taghabun, we know Allah calls our children and our spouses fitna. Not that they are fitna as in, and also Allah calls them enemies. Not that they're by default enemies for us, but our love for them could make us step away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his worship. So in that story, we notice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took that child away to replace him with a better child who would then go on to carry their legacy forward. Right? That's Al-Latif. Now I'll end with this. What is one prophet of Allah you can think of that every step of his life, it seems like this is really bad for him, but when you look at the end of the story, if all of those things didn't happen, he wouldn't be where he was at the end of the story. Which prophet? Yusuf alayhi salam. All right? Just look at his story. In the well, then gets enslaved, then gets what's the word? Put in jail, but before that he gets blasted in the community as someone who had illicit relationships, which is horrible, right? You don't want to live like that. And then he gets put in jail, and all of these challenges. But every one of those steps, Allah Al-Latif was putting a bigger plan together, which was necessary for him to become the king of Egypt, right? So subhanAllah, that is Al-Latif. And in our life, that's something we need to do. Look at your life today and see the events that have taken place. Could you have been where you are today had not some of the things and events happened? And now we actually thank Allah, wow, that was an amazing thing that happened to me. Yesterday we had another brother that accepted Islam. His name is Noah. Make dua for him. These brothers, there's a lot of challenges when they accept Islam. And he came and he was very happy. And he said, my wife accepted Islam, and then I just accepted Islam a week ago. because of what's happening in Palestine. Right? I'm like, this is a common theme right now. There's no secret about it. A huge amount of people are accepting Islam. He said we could see the hypocrisy and the oppression. Because I asked him the question, I said, like, when you see the videos and stuff, like, can you tell the lies and like, how do you see it, right? Because we as Muslims, obviously, we see the pain of our brothers and sisters, but like, I wanted to see an outsider's view. And he's like, yeah, it's very obvious. When we see the videos, you can tell, and that's wwhy we accepted Islam. SubhanAllah. So I'm like, Al-Latif, right? There's people who are dying, but then Allah is raising their ranks, but because of their death, other people are accepting Islam. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us understand the beauty of His names, and let's make dua to Allah by His name Al-Latif in our prayer. سبحانكم بحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين، اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين، اللهم انصر مستضعفين في كل مكان، اللهم انصر مستضعفين في فلسطين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.